What is going on, everybody? Welcome to our next divisional draft grades video. I appreciate your patience on these last two divisions. Was a very busy weekend for me, but should be seeing these last two divisions here over the next 24 hours or so. Then we're going to do a fun look back at my 2022 NFL draft grades, and then we are shifting our attention already over to the summer deep dive series, one of, if not the best things I do on this channel. So very excited for that. But otherwise, let's go ahead and get started with the NFC West and the Arizona Cardinals. You know, they had a whole draft's worth of picks on the first 2 days of the draft, 7 picks. I don't know that I remember seeing that before, and then they weren't done on day 3. So needless to say, when a team makes this many picks, inevitably there's going to be a few that I'm kind of like, on, but definitely a lot of great picks for the Cardinals as well. So a little bit of an up and down draft for me. Quite the haul at the end of the day, though. And it, of course, starts with Marvin Harrison, a player that's so well documented. You're familiar with his game, but still, to stay put, take him at number 4, despite all of the talk over the last few months of, okay, is he going to be there at number 4? And then is it like, are the Cardinals going to trade out of this pick? And I'm like, dude, they have all these picks. Why would they trade out of it? Just take the blue chip talent that could be your Justin Jefferson, elevate Kyler Murray to greatness, and just have that premium wide receivers, let alone to get him on a rookie contract. I mean, with what these wide receivers are getting paid, I feel like we're not bringing that up enough. Like Justin Jefferson on that rookie contract for the Minnesota Vikings has arguably provided rookie quarterback contract value to that team. If Marvin Harrison is as good as we think he is, and he's that level of player, that tier 1 wide receiver, like that could really overhaul the course of this Cardinals team overnight, no matter what happened with the rest of this draft. So going with an A on Marvin there at the top, glad that they stayed put and made it happen. But then they go Darius Robinson at pick 27. And, he was kind of the guy going into the draft where I was like, yeah, I could see him sneaking into the first round, and it's just a little bit early for me. I just don't know that I see like a star player there, or certainly not a superstar, and I just felt like it was always going to be a little bit tough for him to really return first round dividends on that investment, if you will. But a very good player, a top 50 player for me, someone I liked a little bit more than I thought I would going in, given that he's kind of this tweener that, he played edge, but didn't really test like an edge, tested more like a defensive tackle, kind of a late breakout type of guy. But I did like him. His push-pull swim move is fantastic, and kind of lining up over a tackle as a 5-tech or just inside as a shade, as a 4-eye, in run defense, he's really good. They can slide him inside on pass rush downs because they have this huge variety of edge guys. I see how he fits with the Cardinals, and I like the fit. Honestly, yes, it's a little bit early for me, but with the 27th pick, this would have been like a B for me, if not for the fact that Johnny Newton was available, who I think was a real first-round talent that had slipped to you at 27, and to not capitalize on that, I'm going to ding them a little bit for that. I do think they passed on the more impactful pass rusher there, so I don't hate this pick, but I'm going to give it a C. It's just not, glowing with excitement for me. And neither is the Max Melton pick. This, again, was just early for me. I know he had some defenders in this draft as a second-round talent, and that's fine. I didn't see it. I saw him as more of a late third round, early fourth guy, a potential starter, but taking him inside the top 50, it's like, no, you got to be a starting corner for us. And I just, Max Melton, he's undersized. I felt like he really struggled with like the more physical wide receivers that he had to face, just kind of could get thrown off his coverage a little bit with shove-offs, and at the catch point, it's going to be a challenge for him. I also didn't love his kind of off coverage anticipation, that kind of snappy route squeeze. For a guy that is undersized and such a good athlete, I wanted a little bit more quick twitch coverage on his film. And I also don't know if he's going to be good enough to play in the slot either, because he's not the best tackler or most physical run defender, or certainly, struggles to match the physicality of any kind of bigger receiver that he has to face in terms of getting off blocks. So, as an outside corner here to compete with their collection of talent, as an off-zone cover 4 guy, it's like, I don't think he's starting right away, and I think he's got a long ways to go in terms of developing that zone coverage anticipation. So it was just early for me. He has the speed and athletic ability to turn into a starter, but I did think there was better players at this position or just other directions the Cardinals could have gone. I had kind of come into the draft saying, like, I really like the 3rd to 4th round range of corners, not so much the 2nd round guys, because I saw Max Melton more in a cluster with a lot of 3rd, 4th round guys. So just not my favorite pick. It's not. Now, you get Trey Benson at the top of the 3rd. If you could just flip those, I'm like, okay, that's much better for me. We don't really operate like that, but it's fun to do some of those mental gymnastics. But yeah, Trey Benson was my RB1. I felt like he was one of the more underrated players throughout this entire process. I feel like we've really beat this whole you can't draft running backs thing early into the dirt, and we beat the whole idea of this running back class sucks into the dirt. And I'm like, I don't know, guys. Trey Benson looks every bit like a Breece Hall, like a Kenneth Walker, like a lot of these backs that have been top 40 picks and been superstars out the gate. I thought Trey Benson was every bit those guys, if not a little more. In fact, my grade was really close on Benson as I had on Jahmyr Gibbs last year. I think he's incredibly dynamic, a moving speed train with the ball in his hands, underrated as a receiving threat. You know, his vision was fine, nothing exceptional there, but certainly good enough. And in a wide zone system like Arizona wants to run, I think he'll be fantastic. I think you ease him in, and in a year, he's going to overtake James Conner here and give you a ton of dynamism there. So I love that. I mean, my pro comp on Trey Benson on the high end was Jonathan Taylor. On the low end, I said Isaiah Pacheco. If you get anything in between those two players with the 2nd pick in the 3rd round, that is a certified steal for me. So I love that pick. And then we're kind of right back to a pick I didn't love here in Isaiah Adams. I had him as a later day 3 prospect. Now, I'm going to put a D grade on this because I'm going to stand by my evaluations. That's how we're doing these draft grades. Based on what I saw in Isaiah Adams, I did think this was a very major reach, and other players that you could have gone with for interior offensive line. Loads of them, actually. Probably 4 or 5 other guys that had as legit day 2 talents that were still here. But I am a little bit more open-minded with Isaiah Adams as opposed to maybe some of these other. We saw this run of reaches at the top of the 3rd round. Was really hard on the Commanders for the Brandon Coleman pick. I didn't see it with Caden Wallace for the Patriots. With Isaiah Adams, I am at least a little more intrigued because he had switched from guard to tackle in his final year at Illinois. I watched his tackle film, and he definitely looked very uncomfortable, discoordinated, really hands down to his feet, just didn't really look comfortable at tackle. But if you look at his PFF grading profile, and I know PFF grades aren't perfect, but when he was at guard, he was a menace in terms of the grading profile. So I saw him as like a 6th round guy. I didn't want to go back a year and watch his guard tape. I just, it was pretty far down in my pecking order of guys I wanted to get to. So I'm at least intrigued by the thought of like, okay, they watched him at guard and thought he had 3rd, 4th round tape at guard because he does look the part. I liked the one thing I noticed with him is I really liked his demeanor in the run game. Though, again, he kind of fell off blocks and didn't really connect on everything. But I am at least interested in the idea that I just didn't get to the good stuff on Isaiah Adams. So it's worth noting there and how that could look back in a couple years with this D grade looking a lot better in a couple years. But then they go Tip Raymond in the middle of the 3rd. I mean, okay, I was a huge Tip Raymond guy. I was really beating the drum like, hey, this is the guy we should be talking about for his crazy combine workout, not Theo Johnson. Tip Raymond ends up going ahead of Theo Johnson. So I was really happy to see that. Now, I still had a 5th round grade on him because he's a complete, and I thought I was high on him when I put a 5th round grade on Tip Raymond. He's a complete like project of a tight end, really. He was completely underutilized in the receiving game at Illinois. I thought he showed some good run after catch stuff. But in terms of the route running and the sort of nuances as a receiving tight end, it just wasn't really there. So you got to kind of make him prove what he can do as a receiving tight end. And then as a blocker, like he's 270 pounds and moves like a deer. So he can displace guys and connect on some really impact blocks, but has to sustain good pad level, has to continue to work on his technique. He's not like a certified starter out the gate. Now, I do like him next to Trey McBride, who can really move all over the formation, and then Tip Raymond can be your big 12 personnel guy right away. This is a team that does want to get into wide zone and that 12 personnel Shanahan style stuff with Drew Petzing's offense coming over from Cleveland. So, you add Trey Benson, maybe a better run blocker in Isaiah Adams, Tip Raymond, like you can start to get a little more physical up front. But some of these guys do have to hit. Overall, it was early for me on Tip Raymond, but I do like the fit and kind of believe in him here. And then Elijah Jones at the end of the third round, wasn't really sure where he was going to go, was kind of suspiciously dismissed or left the team at Boston College, 6-year player there, missed the last quarter of his season, but really talented player, ton of physical traits, really kind of a shutdown 6th season at Boston College. So I think there's a case to be made that he might be better than Max Melton if the off-field stuff, and I don't really know what was going on there. It could have just been family issues and he had to leave the team. So I don't want to say he's got like off-field issues, but there was some kind of suspiciousness going on there. And I have yet to hear, I've brought this up before and no one's really given me a great answer. So I don't really know, but clearly it wasn't enough for the Cardinals to be scared off of him. They like the traits, they like the tape. And I think it's a solid end of third round pick for those types of traits at corner. He's a little bit older, but I think they have a really fun competition now with the new rookies they brought in, the guys they drafted last year. They're just going to kind of let these guys go to war, and hopefully you emerge with a couple starters there. Then they're obviously not done. They made 5 more picks on day 3. Love the Dadrian Taylor Demerson pick for where they got him. I had him right around this range, 3rd to a 4th round pick. My high-end pro comp on him is Jalen Thompson. A ton of speed and a guy that loves to tackle from the back end. Maybe not the most sticky coverage player or most instinctive coverage player on the back end. Still some stuff to develop in terms of route IQ. It felt like there was a lot of times on film where he's dropping into his zone and just kind of letting guys get open around him, not really seeing it all the time. So I like the opportunity for him to come in and learn behind Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson, 2 guys that I don't know if they're your forever safeties back there. If nothing else, is going to be a fantastic backup and a special teamer. Then one of my favorite picks they made here is Xavier Thomas in the 5th round. I mean, he falls because of a lot of injuries and kind of a career that had kind of a beaten path. He was a super highly recruited guy coming out of high school. I think he was number 3 recruit in his college class, and just never really had it all come together for him at Clemson. But the final year was his best year, his 6th season at Clemson, and he was really a part of a rotation at that point. But a very productive pass rusher in his final year. I think he plays the run with a lot of effort and honestly IQ at this point. So I certainly thought end of 3rd, early 4th round, you take a gamble that he can stay healthy and that things have really clicked for him. To me, he is the most physically talented pass rusher off the edge that the Arizona Cardinals now have in that room. Definitely a lot of Hassan Reddick in his game in terms of just the speed and bend around the edge. I want to see him get to that bull rush a little bit more, convert that speed to power a little bit more because I think it's in him. But I think it's a great opportunity for Xavier Thomas to kind of get in the mix and compete with it. It's a motley crew of edge rushers in Arizona. They got like 4 to 6 different guys that are all trying to earn that, starting edge rush role. And no one's really taken it yet. So I'm excited to see what he can do there. And then Christian Jones at the end of the 5th round. I mean, I thought he was the guy that probably could have taken 3rd round. That was a name I kept bringing up with teams like the Commanders and the Patriots. He could be a much better player than some of those guys. So if you flip him and Isaiah Adams, it's like, yeah, it makes a lot more sense. I thought Christian Jones, a former soccer player with really great feet, really good with his hands, had a great Senior Bowl week. His tape was good. He started 1 million games at Texas. Maybe not the best play strength and maybe never going to be a forever starter, but as a swing tackle, I love it. Just needs to get a little bit better at recognizing inside counters. That was kind of where he lost the most. But he has the foot speed to cut that stuff off. So a little bit of development needed for him, but really liked his tape I had him as a 3rd round guy. So to get him in the 5th round is fantastic. Then they go to a couple guys they didn't get around to. Tajon Palmer, the wide receiver out of UAB, and Jaden Davis, kind of more of a slot build out of Miami. So another guy to kind of get in the mix in what's going to be a very crowded cornerback room this year in Arizona after all these picks. A very fun draft, a little bit up and down. Like I said, it's kind of to be expected when you make this many picks. There's going to be some ones I didn't fully see it, but they needed this one to be kind of a franchise-altering draft. I think they got pretty close. They're going to need some of these guys to hit, like Max Melton, Isaiah Adams, Tip Raymond, Elijah Jones, all guys with a lot of riskiness in terms of what they're expecting to see from them. So they need a couple of those guys to hit. Love what they did on day 3 as well, of course. So some picks I would have gone in a different direction, but overall, I think it's a B-plus draft for the Arizona Cardinals. And certainly the potential to look back on this as an A-plus draft for them. But let's get to the LA Rams, who I think had a great draft that was otherwise clouded by, seriously, in my opinion, the worst move any team made this entire draft in trading up for Braden Fisk in the second round. We'll get to that. But Jared Verse out the gate makes a ton of sense, right? Like, there was a run of edge rushers. He was the best guy available, one of the best players on the board at the time. I love the process. You lose Aaron Donald. You can't just count on the sort of Aaron Donald effect elevating the pass rush. I like Kobe Turner, but if you were to kind of go into next year and be like, you're the guy, go be Aaron Donald, I think they could have run into a lot of problems. Now it's like, okay, you have Kobe Turner and Jared Verse and Byron Young. Like, there's legit pieces there to build around. Now, I'm giving that pick an A. Makes a ton of sense. Not even really a ton to say about it. But the Braden Fisk move, so many things wrong with this. So those that have followed my draft content, he was really the guy that I have kind of pounded the table for, stuck my neck out and be like, I don't get it. I don't see this at all. Started at the Senior Bowl, then the Combine, getting through his tape. I did like 4 Braden Fisk games, and I'm like, I just don't see a top 50 player, a top 40 here for the Rams. I saw a late 3rd, early 4th round prospect, a guy that's going to be a splash play, rotational run defender that has, yes, an incredible first step and wildly quick feet that don't accomplish much at the defensive tackle position. My take on this is 5 years ago, someone should have told him to play linebacker because that's how he's built. He's got tiny arms, 30.5 inches. It really hurts his ability to use his upper half to actually displace offensive linemen, to get to counters, to have effective counters. He comes off the ball, he'll shoot a gap occasionally. That's why I said he's a splash play rotational defender, either as a pass rusher or as a run defender. Like, sometimes that quickness lined up as a shade will split a gap and get in the backfield and it'll cause some problems. But even then, with his short arms, he misses a bunch of tackles. He struggles to wrap guys up. But I'm getting through game after game after game, and yes, I see the get-off. I see the quickness. It's not one of those situations where the athleticism doesn't show on tape. It absolutely does. But any sort of quality guard is able to just, slide left and right, stay in front of him, keep matching his punches, and it's like you're waiting on anything Braden Fisk does to actually have effectiveness. His pass rush productivity fell off a cliff the second he left Western Michigan. He's a 6th-year player. He's going to be 24 in his rookie season. He's an abysmal run defender because he's 295 pounds. He struggles to stack and peak and defend the run from any sort of traditional standpoint. Again, you can put him in a gap, say, hey, split the tackle in a guard, get in the backfield. Hopefully we're guessing the right run concept and you can make a play in the backfield. You'll get those occasionally, but it's 1 out of 4 plays, whereas the other 3 plays, he's getting blown off the ball because he's just not a good run defender. So not only to take him with the 39th pick in the draft, but to trade a future 2nd round pick to move up 12 spots for this player, where there's a cluster of guys in this draft. Chris Jenkins goes 3 picks before where the Rams traded up. Braden Fisk might have made it to you. Hell, I like it. I like gambling on Mason Smith in this D-line with this culture and this team more than I like taking Braden Fisk at this point. And then, of course, my guy Michael Hall Jr., who I just think is such a substantially better prospect than Braden Fisk, does a lot of the same stuff, just a lot better, and I think has more potential as a run defender because he's putting on weight and has the arm length. So to be like so convicted that you had to reunite the Florida State duo, I think is a massive mistake by the Rams. And I have all the respect in the world for Les Snead and Sean McVay. They're very good at this drafting thing. But sometimes great front offices do some really stupid shit. And I really cannot get behind this move. I think there's a world where the rest of this draft makes up for this. There's a world where I'm just wrong and, you know, all of a sudden Braden Fisk is able to win as a pass rusher more than he was in college. After 6 years, sure. But you're really counting on, I think, other moves, and you're going to be sitting here without a second-round pick next year. I've run out of words to describe how fucking stupid this was by the Rams. So, gonna give that an F. It is going to heavily impact their final grade here because it's not just a massive reach, but the second-round pick next year. Like, come on, what are we doing here? But, you know, the rest of their draft was really good. Love Blake Corum in the middle of the third round. You can go listen to what I said about him in my, pre-draft running back rankings video. I was breaking him down. I was like, and I just really like the Kyren Williams comp. Very similar player. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams are targeting Blake Corum with the intention of not paying Kyren Williams long-term because he really is like the same player. Here they go. They take him in the third round. It's so much sense. You're going to have a 1-2 punch, keep those guys healthy. It's going to be frustrating from a running back angle for those that had Kyren Williams, for a fantasy football angle for those that had Kyren Williams. But eventually I do think they let Kyren go and Blake kind of just overtakes that role. I love what they've kind of built with these massive, power style guards and centers now with Steve Avila moving inside. They create a bunch of drive off the ball, and then you have these tiny backs with excellent vision that are going to maximize that push that just get lost behind these dudes. It's a really unique thing that they've built with this run game, and it works for a reason. Then you go Cam Kinchins, end of the third round. Love this one. I definitely thought third round talent, really good tape. He's a risk taker back there. Loves to guess and jump stuff. You see some really exciting plays. We saw some great ball production from him, and then you see some really bad busted coverages. So it can be a liability sometimes with him. I don't know that he'll start right away, but he'll certainly be in the mix because I'm just not that big of a fan of their safety group. His play style definitely makes him a little bit of a boomer bust prospect, or at least a boomer bust player on a week-to-week basis. But I do like the fit and the value at the end of the third round. Then you go to day 3. Brennan Jackson, I think, is just a really good rotational piece to put into that edge group. Does a little bit of everything. A really high-effort dude with great size and, wins with a variety of different rush moves. I liked his tape. It's just he wasn't the best athlete. Just felt like, okay, this guy's going to be a good kind of innings eater in your edge group as a third or a fourth piece. So I thought the value checked out there. Definitely could still use more depth in that room. They go Tyler Davis out of Clemson. Not disfamiliar to Braden Fisk in terms of play style. He's not the biggest guy. He's like 6'2", 300 pounds, but he's got a great first step, incredibly high effort, throws his arms around, is always trying stuff, but it's just to minimal effect. So you kind of get a couple of these guys. Then they go kicker. Late 6th. Love the Jordan Whittington pick. He was one of my sort of day 3 my guys. Talked about him in my kind of sleepers show with EJ Snyder. And I was just talking about how, like, if he goes to the right fit where he can play the Jawan Jennings role, the Ben Skoranek role in a Kyle Shanahan offense as a quasi tight end / slot wide receiver, he's going to be a good player. Maybe not this year's Puka Nacua for the Rams. I don't know that exists for anybody, but I think he is a supercharged version of Ben Skoranek. Wouldn't be surprised if he just beats him out right away. This is exactly the type of player that they love. He's really good after the catch. He's an excellent run blocker. He's got good size. He's got underrated speed. I liked his tape out of Texas, and I don't think he could have landed in a better spot, honestly. So love that pick. Then Bo Limmer in the 6th round is crazy value, especially as a backup for the Rams. He was really quick off the ball, excellent run blocker, does need to improve his pass protection. He can stop his feet at times. I think that's very likely why he fell. But as a center, the reality is that doesn't hurt you too often. So he's not going to have to start. But I think he could someday for them as a 6th-round pick. Really a steep fall for him. I do wonder if there was injury-related stuff with him, because this just did not match the tape and the physical profile to me for him to fall this far. Dude had like a 36-inch vertical jump or something. He's super explosive. Can really displace guys off the ball and be that power center for them. Not that they need it. I think Steve Avila can do that, but really great pick there. Ton of value. And then they take KT Livingston out of Kansas State. Played tackle next to Cooper Beebe, but definitely someone I think can slide inside and maybe even be a better pro guard than he was at college tackle. Certainly someone to keep an eye on, but late 7th round, very solid pick there. So, look, love this draft, other than one move that I will reiterate I think was the dumbest thing any team did over draft weekend. 2 second-round picks to take Braden Fisk that early. I just, based on what I watched, can't get behind that. We'll see how that ages, but it is going to impact their grade fairly substantially here. I'm going to go with a C+ on the Rams draft. Think they missed out on the opportunity to just get an impact player in the 2nd round, let alone not give up their 2nd round pick next year for that guy. So it does, I think, have a good enough chance based on what I saw to look back on this draft and say, yeah, they could have gotten a lot more out of this one, though they might get some good players with all these picks. And Verse should be pretty damn solid too. But then we got the San Francisco 49ers. A very solid draft. I don't have a ton of takes on this one. They go Ricky Pearsall in the 1st round. This made sense to me. Value checked out. I had a 1st to a 2nd round grade on him. I didn't really put this together until after he went to the Niners, but I was like, you know what? There is a lot of Brandon Ayuk in his game. Just in terms of, the size is very similar. I think the ball skills, the route running, all very similar to Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk's a little bit thicker, a little bit better after the catch, but to me, this pick did signal like, hey, we can't really afford Brandon Ayuk. He's not a part of our long-term plans. We'll see. I know they've talked about Debo getting traded too, but at least in terms of the role within that offense, definitely more Brandon Ayuk in the Ricky Pearsall pick than Debo. So something to monitor, but I think with the run on tackles that we saw, this made a ton of sense. He was very close to the best player available, if not the best. And I don't think we talk enough about with what these wide receivers are getting paid. Like Ayuk could be getting $33 million here. That's like quarterback money, right? Like that's close to what Baker Mayfield got. So you take a wide receiver at the end of the 1st round, you get that 5th-year option. There is a ton of capitalized value there. It's not just value in terms of the draft board. It's like what you got to pay these guys. So I think it's a very good process by the Niners. I'm giving that pick an A. I think Ricky's a stud. Really fun to see him go in the 1st round, as he wasn't an afterthought in this wide receiver class, but wasn't really pushed up with the Adonai Mitchells and the Xavier Worthies. It's like, oh, this guy could go in the 1st round. Well, there you go. Ricky off the board is wide receiver 6. Loved his tape. Love to see this. Then Renardo Green, end of the 2nd round, very on par for the Niners in terms of their style. Very physical dude, not the fastest, not the biggest even, not even 6 foot tall, under 190 pounds for like a press man style corner. It was really a weird draft where there was like 4 or 5 of these guys, like Rakestraw, McKinstry, even Terrion Arnold, Renardo Green. It's like, yeah, these guys play like 6'1", 200-pound corners with long arms. None of them really fit that mold. I mean, the arm length on these guys was fine, but yeah, I mean, I had a 3rd-round grade on him. They take him at the end of the 2nd round. I think it's a very solid pick. We'll see if he can turn into a starter for them. I think in this system, he's got a good enough chance to do that. Then they go Dominique Puny, kind of mid to end 3rd round there. This pick was fine, a little bit earlier than I would have liked him. I think they might have been kind of, slapping their knees, amen, in a little bit when Zach Zinter goes the pick before this, because I think stylistically he's like a similar player, but a little bit better at everything. Puny is not a good athlete. I'm worried about his pass protection, his foot speed, guys crossing his face at the next level. But also, with the Niners, it's not that they need wide zone run blockers. They've kind of altered what we think about the Shanahan offense. It's not like, oh, we got to get a Christian Haynes who has that easy, oily bucket step to open up and reach block a guy with crazy athleticism, kind of like they used to be, so wide zone heavy. You know, they're a lot more north and south, counter, trap, power stuff. Puny is going to be good at that stuff, so north and south blocking is right up his alley. But there were some other guys I liked better, and it was just a little bit early. So I'm going to go B. Could be a starter for them, but could also just not be a starter. Could just be a backup. Like, I don't think he's a guaranteed starter. We'll see where that goes. Then you go day 3. Definitely from a value perspective, the best thing the Niners did, in my opinion, and one of my favorite picks as a whole, though as a Packers fan, I freaking hate it. Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest couldn't be a better fit in terms of team. They love these smashing, hard-hitting safeties. Tyre Tart to Talanoa Hufanga to Jair Brown, Malik Mustafa, right par for the course with those guys. I mean, look, I think he has, I know Hufanga is like a beloved player in San Francisco, but I think Mustafa can be a better player in terms of coverage. I just saw really underrated like speed and coverage and anticipation on the back end. Not that that's his strong suit, but from what people had said about him, where, oh, he's this big, stiff, thumping, strong safety only guy, I'm like, no, I think you can put him in a split safety defense. He can even rotate single highs. He did at Wake Forest. He's not going to be the rangiest, best deep safety, but he's got 4.54 speed back there with a really good first step. It's rangy enough to do that occasionally, and it's just a perfect fit with the Niners because that's what they love. They love quarters. They love, showing too high, rotating different directions, elements of the Fangio defense without being a soft, squishy Fangio defense. So I don't know how that whole room is going to play out, right? But I do know that Malik Mustafa is a damn good football player. He was my number 1 safety in this draft, and I knew I was freaking crazy when I did that. But it was kind of a flavor of the month safety class with a bunch of different styles. I just thought his floor as certainly a strong safety, but enough of a floor to do the rest of the stuff, and how good of a tackler and how big of a hitter he is, I fell in love with his game, had a true second round grade on him. So to get him in the middle of the 4th round is undeniable value based on how I saw Mustafa. So I think he could be really like a Talanoa Hufanga, like a Pro Bowl caliber talent on this team especially. So someone to look out for sure. Then Isaac Guerendo, 5 picks later. I mean, I'm giving this a great pick, right on the nose in terms of value, 4th to a 5th round grade, but Raheem Mostert is everybody's pro count for him. It's clear as day. It's very obvious when you watch him. Like, this is every running back Kyle Shanahan has historically ever liked. A wide zone specialist, a one-cut runner, size, speed train type of dude, right? Like, so many reasons to say this could work out. Like, you don't need me to explain the upside and the good side of this as a late 4th round pick. A couple things I want to point out. Anybody that's ever watched this channel knows how much I love Kyle Shanahan. I'm not trying to say he's got an identity crisis on his hands here, but it is interesting. They take the abysmal athlete, the power blocking, north and south run blocking guy in Dominique Puny, and then the next round he goes right back to being like, give me the wide zone, dude. I need Isaac Guerendo. And it's like, okay, I'm going to stop short of going any further than that. I just think it's interesting. I hate questioning Kyle Shanahan, but there's been some picks that, just haven't worked out for them, especially at this position as the other side of this, where they have had an incredible run of just completely whiffing on mid-round running backs. Now, I think Isaac Guerendo is the best pick they've made. I slammed them for the Ty Davis Price pick. Had some questions about Trey Benson. I mean, it goes back even further than that. I can't remember if Shanahan was here when they took Marcus Lattimore in like the 3rd round. They took a Utah kid in there. There's been like 4, 5, 6 even running backs that they've taken relatively early, and he just fades into oblivion the second the Niners take him. So I'm not saying that's going to be Guerendo, but I will say I think everybody's like, oh, Isaac Guerrero will be Raheem Mostert on the Niners. And I'm like, well, they're not really doing the wide zone stuff as much anymore. And I don't like Isaac Guerrero in a power scheme. He actually has a very slow first step. That's a big criticism on him. Doesn't really hit gaps hard. He needs that wide zone buildup. So he might just be like a specialist. And is it keying off to your opponent that it's wide zone when he's in the game? There's some aspects to this pick that could lead to this not working out. But overall, I think this has a much better chance of working out than not, and makes a ton of sense. So love that pick. But then they go Jacob Cowing, end of the 4th round. Okay, it's a solid pick. I think it's an average pick. A lot of people like Jacob Cowing. He's a speedster. I think he can get in the mix there with Danny Gray, a 3rd round pick a couple years ago, as a deep threat in that room. Very undersized. I think he's kind of a deep threat specialist type of guy. Didn't love him, to be honest. So it's fine. They go West Coast offensive line out of USC, end of the 6th round. Jarrett Kingston. Sounds like they're going to slide him inside, potentially as much as into center. He played a little guard, played a little tackle at USC. He's like a very poor man's Roger Rosengarten, where it's like you see the athleticism, you see some of the traits, even some flashes of good technique and pass protection, but just really abysmal play strength. So, sliding him inside, again, more of a probably wide zone style blocker. So, as opposed to more of a displacing guys, going power, pin and pull type of stuff. So, we'll see where that goes. Thought it was fine. And then Tatum Bethune out of Florida State, definitely a special teams type of talent. Just doesn't really have the traits, but a high effort, experienced linebacker there. So, fill out the depth chart. It's fine. If Devondre Campbell goes down and you're still waiting on Greenlaw to get back, he could step in and probably not look lost for you. And then I did have one UDFA steal for the 49ers. I didn't forget, by the way, for the Rams and the Cardinals. Just no one really stood out to me. But they did pick up Cody Schrader. I did think he was a draftable running back. There's literally no room for him to make the team this year. So maybe they'll stash him on the practice squad. But as you project a year out, if Mitchell and Jordan Mason are no longer with the team next year, I think Cody Schrader can be a really good backup running back in the league. Really good first step into the hole, great vision, underrated receiving back, just not the biggest guy or the most athletically gifted, but walked on at Missouri and eventually became one of the most productive backs in all of the SEC. So we did mention this team has a record of missing on their mid-round pick, and then the guy they pick up later being better. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that happens again here with Guerrero and Schrader. I wouldn't predict it to happen, but would sure as hell be funny if it did happen again. So again, not a lot of crazy takes on the Niners, a very kind of down the fairway draft for them. It's a B-plus draft for me, very solid. I would be slightly remiss if I didn't at least point out that their offensive line, I know they took Puny, we'll see what he can be, but that was a massive need for them to not walk out of the first 2 rounds in a very good offensive line class. It's an interesting and potentially tough pill to swallow. Shanahan kind of makes it work with those guys as he did last year, but I did wish he could have gotten, one of those tackles or one of those higher end guards, and they didn't. Maybe the difference between this being an A- and a B+ potentially, and something to keep an eye on into next season. And let's move on to wrap up the NFC West with the Seattle Seahawks. And this was, I think, my favorite draft in terms of my board, my guys, taking guys that I genuinely would have drafted if I was in the GM chair. And I loved this especially because the GM there, John Schneider, went to my alma mater, University of St. Thomas. In local here used to be D3. Now it's kind of getting into the D1 ranks. But I just thought it was funny. The first time he's at the real driver's seat, he was kind of in the driver's ed style car with Pete Carroll. Well, Pete Carroll was really driving, but John Snyder kind of had the brakes and maybe a second steering wheel at times. But this one was like, nope, this is your car. You running the show here, John Schneider. And very funny to see a guy out of a small Minnesota school that is a GM in the NFL drafting pretty much exactly what I would have done for the Seahawks here. And I know a lot of Seahawks fans are going to be like, hold up, no, you were giving us Graham Barton all this time in terms of what you would do in these mock drafts. And yes, that's true, but in most of my mock drafts, based on what I felt about Byron Murphy, he wasn't getting to the Seahawks at 16, and that's why I do think this is a steal. I think any number of teams with the 6 or 7 picks before the Seahawks had to have been strongly thinking about Byron Murphy, who I think was very firmly in the conversation for best defensive player in the draft. And when you factor in how seldom legit defensive tackle prospects like this come around, that's extra value. Like, this has become a just wasteland position in terms of finding legit talent. I mean, you had Jalen Carter last year who had his off-field stuff, and then you got to go back to like Quinnen Williams and Ed Oliver. I mean, that's pretty much it in terms of legit 3-down defensive tackle superstar potential type of prospects. I see that in Byron Murphy, and Seattle has needed a game-wrecking player in their front for so long. They've had so many different investments and trades and free agent signings and just different guys that they've put in the mix here. They're a very solid defensive line, but finally they have a piece where I'm like, no, that can be your building block for this defense and lift everybody else up. So huge fan of that pick. I think you put all those things together, it is a certified steal for me in the sense that I think he could have, like, for him to be there at 16 was incredible value, but just to get a guy at this position group too, it's an underrated thing right now that, you know, finding defensive tackles ain't what it used to be. It's a very challenging position to get these guys now. And then to get Christian Haynes in the middle of the 3rd round, I mean, a main reason I had been taking Graham Barton for them is without a 2nd-round pick, I didn't think they were going to be able to get a starter in the 3rd round. And Christian Haynes, to me, was a top 50 player in this draft. I think the best wide zone run blocker in this entire draft, at least for the interior offensive line prospects. A remarkable athlete, really strong dude, not a bad pass protector, room to grow there. He can give up some ground at times and let guys cross his face at times, but I think there's a lot to work with there. I think he is immediately the best interior offensive lineman on this team. I don't know if it was age or level of competition, why he fell, because he is going to be, I think, 25 maybe by the end of his rookie season. He's a very old player. But the Seahawks needed that guy now. That age might even work in their benefit here. So I couldn't be happier with what they did with those first 2 picks. I think made up a lot of ground in the sense that Leonard Williams trade was pretty rough. Thinking that was a missing piece for that defense, giving up a 2nd-round pick. Well, I think they made back a round of value there, getting Christian Haynes in the 3rd. And then it wasn't just those first 2 picks where John Schneider was taking my favorite players. I mean, Tyrese Knight, I thought I was high on him with a 4th to a 5th round grade on him as a top 10 linebacker in this draft. Led all of college football in defensive stops, really good run defense tape, a good athlete, good size. Just needs to learn some of the coverage aspects of the position. But I thought I was high on him. John Schneider takes him on like the front of the range that I liked him. But he was one of my favorite developmental linebackers in this draft, and it's a really good spot where they signed some veterans, but I think Knight has starting potential on this team in a year or two. So those first 2 picks was like, is John Schneider watching the channel? And then that pick came off the board. I was like, I thought I was the only one that liked this guy. And there he goes, ahead of a lot of linebackers that people were more aware of, but definitely a sleeper in this draft, but maybe not so much anymore, going 4th round there. Then you go A.J. Barner 3 picks later. Makes a ton of sense. It's right around where I had him going. The best blocking tight end in the draft. They lost Will Dissly. If they want to go to 12 personnel, you can drop him right in there day 1. Very reasonable, rational pick there. And then again with Nehemiah Pritchett, a total my guy in this draft. I probably didn't do enough like pointing him out as one of my favorite sleepers in this draft, other than on Patreon, where in the 7-round mock draft series, I kept taking him for all these teams in the 3rd, 4th round. you know, he reminded me a lot of Rasul Douglas when I was watching him. That off-zone kind of ball-hawking, high IQ guy that just sees stuff so well. But because he's playing in that off-zone system, it was kind of tough to get a gauge on how fast he really was. So I had a Rasul Douglas comp on him, and then he comes out and runs in the mid 4.3s, and I'm like, oh, he's got an extra gear in there. So I had a third-round grade on him. You get him at the top of the 5th round here. I think it's exceptional value. I'm not going to quite go as far as saying he's better than Tariq Woolen, but Woolen's heading into year 3. He was definitely had a down year last year. It's something to at least keep an eye on, and certainly they like to put Witherspoon in the slot as well, and I think Pritchett has a very good chance of winning an outside corner job within the first 500 days of his career here in Seattle. So I do think there's starting potential. And I love how he fits Mike McDonald's defense, too, where it is a lot of zone stuff, eyes on the quarterback, go be a playmaker. So love that pick. Then they go developmental O-line. Lamea out of Utah, very much developmental, sloppy technique, but there's potential there. Solid enough pick in the 6th round. They take the other corner, DJ James, who I was a little bit lower on him than Pritchett, but still liked him. Very different player, undersized, speedster, quick twitch guy. You know, I think as a backup to Devon Witherspoon makes a lot of sense with that inside-out flexibility. And as a dime corner as well, if you want to get into kind of, 4 corners on the field, a little more man coverage, gives you a little flexibility there. Just too useful of a secondary player to pass up in the 6th round. I think he has starting potential with his speed and kind of, he's a sticky coverage player. It's just, kind of him and Max Melton to me were very close, which is kind of funny because Melton went in the 2nd. But kind of that undersized super athlete with maybe starting potential. And then they go with another developmental offensive lineman out of Finlay at the end of the 6th round. And then for the Seahawks, one UDFA guy to keep an eye on. They pick up Garrett Greenfield out of South Dakota State. Was in there in the trenches kicking ass next to Mason McCormick. Reminded me a lot of like D1A version of like a David Bakhtiari or Laramie Tunsil, where he was an exceptional pass protector at that level of competition, but actually was wildly underwhelming as a run blocker to me. So I think that's definitely why he went undrafted. Just not a great athlete, but you spent a couple project picks at tackle there or guard. And then you have had issues with Abraham Lucas staying healthy. So if Lucas goes down and Greenfield makes the team, he might be their best option in year 1 as a higher floor pass protector to not get Geno killed out there. Someone to keep an eye on for sure. So I love the Seahawks draft. I really did. I'm going A+ on this one. Now, this is definitely one that the fact that we're doing these draft grades off of my own draft board is really reflected here, right? Because I don't think based on consensus, people are going to look at this and be like, oh yeah, Christian Haynes, Tyrese Knight, Nehemiah Pritchett, what incredible steals. But for me, they were really great players, really good fits for what they needed. Thought the Seahawks absolutely crushed this draft. They didn't have a ton of needs, but I think they drafted really well at the positions that they did need. I mean, even down to like getting that blocking tight end to replace Will Dissly is just a very subtle but kind of almost perfect fit for what they needed. So A+ draft for the Seattle Seahawks, one of my favorites of all these drafts that we've reviewed. So we just got one more of these to do. AFC West fans, thank you for your patience. Let me know in the comments down below where you think I'm right, where you think I'm wrong, where you think I'm absolutely crazy with these draft grades. Am I completely off mark on my Braden Fisk hate? Let me know in the comments down below. Please do hit that like button on the way out as well. It really helps me out. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you very soon for our last draft grades video. Peace out.